Well, hey guys, this video brought to you compliments of Brex is all about dahlia planting in containers, but also make sure you watch all the way to the end because I've got a list of some other things that I'm going to try from them. I got some begonias and some lilies. Anyhow, it'll be fun. I always like trying something new every year, and for me, these are new varieties from Brex that I'm going to give a go. So make sure you watch all the way through to the end. Well, I, like you probably, am really jumping on the dahlia bandwagon. They are so extremely popular right now. This year, I'm going to plant them in pots. Last year, I planted some from Brex in the ground. Brex is typically my go-to source for dahlia tubers. And this year, I kind of thought about the color theme and where I wanted to place them in the context of my garden. And I've got one area that's more romantic and kind of pinky. And then in the potager, it tends to be more, late summer, early fall traditional colors. So for the pink area, I got double shine dahlia. I've got 2 clumps here. These are warm pink with yellow near the center. One thing I like about bulbs packaging is on the bag itself, it shows exactly what it is, how tall it will grow, how far apart you should plant them, and other tips, other planting tips. Now, this is going to be for the pink part of the garden, but I also got some Mingus Alex dahlia. That's an interesting name. These are voluptuous with petals of deep velvety red. These will go in another area of the garden for that color palette. And I always try to keep that in mind, especially because late in the summer and in early fall, a lot of times there's not a lot going on in our gardens, and this is the way, especially if we plant them in containers, that we can just plop them into the border. Now, let's first of all talk a little bit, now that I've talked about plant selection and color selection, let's talk a little bit about pot selection. What is interesting about planting and cultivating dahlias in containers, and a little bit surprising to me actually, is that they really need width more than they need depth, and I find that a little bit fascinating. So a traditional azalea pot, a traditional azalea terracotta pot is kind of that squatty, stubby shape that you tend to think of for those kinds of parameters for growth. Now this one is not an azalea pot, it's on a foot, however, it's a footed planter, and the shape of the top, this is really a gorgeous pot, I think. The shape of the top is, a little bit squattier as well. Now, something else to take into consideration, especially if you plant dahlias like I do here in Oklahoma, if you live in a really windy location, now you want to make sure that not only is the pot the right size and shape, but it's also the right heft, and it has a certain amount of weight so that in high winds it won't blow over, and that's definitely a consideration here because these dahlias, these are going to get, these are going to get 44 inches. Most dahlias get around 4 feet tall, which is going to make them a bit top heavy. I'm going to have to stake them, and so I want to make sure that wherever I place them, they're going to be very stable and supported by the pot itself. Now that we've selected the tuber and the pot, now let's do some planting. Now, what you always want to make sure is that you've got a really good quality tuber, and that's one of the reasons that I like to order from Brex. They are not mushy in any way. They're a little bit dried out, of course, as they tend to be when you get dahlia tubers, but look at the size of that. So these are going to be perfect for this pot, and what I'm going to do is kind of just eyeball it to make sure I've got room for both of these. Now, in terms of preparation for my planting mix, I'm using just a really loose, good quality potting mix, especially for container gardens. I added about 3 tablespoons of this slow release once fertilizer, because dahlias are heavy feeders. I mean, they really need pretty much fertilization to put out those fabulous blooms later on down the line. So I want to make sure that I've got enough fertilizer and enough food in there to support their growth. Now, some resources that I read suggested using in the bottom third of the pot a kind of a water absorbing polymer that will hold the moisture so that they don't dry out. But this is a know thyself. I tend to overwater more than underwater, and so I want to make sure that I don't overwater these and cause any kind of tuber rot. So, knowing myself, I'm not going to include any of those water absorbing polymers. Now, it is a good draining, very well draining potting mix. Again, that's crucial, one of the reasons that I'm growing them in containers. Now, again, it will tell me on the bag, this says plant 2 inches deep and 24 to 36 inches apart. So for these, I will probably just put 1 clump per pot. And I'm just going to look to see kind of like where the eyes are and where they will come up. Now I've got one here that's kind of damaged, and well, it might not be, it might make it. Okay, so I'm just going to place these so that the eye is in the center of the pot, because obviously I want the stalk to come up from the center of the pot. So now that I've got this in place, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cover it with about 2 inches of this soil. I'll probably add a little bit more later. And then I'm just going to gently moisten it for now, because I don't want to, they want to be moist, but they don't want to be waterlogged. So I'll give this a gentle misting and a light rain. I'll put a little bit more potting mix on, and then I'll tell you about my strategy going forward. So you can see that I've kind of moistened it a little bit, and I'm kind of doing what I think of as a mounding technique for planting these. These ideally want to be, about 2 inches deep, but I'm going to plant them ultimately a little bit deeper, but not yet. Right now they're only about 1 inch deep. So I'm going to make sure that this remains moist, and then as soon as I start seeing the stalk grow, I'm going to slowly over time add more soil to support the stalks. And then eventually it will be, probably about to this level in my container with adequate room for watering without soil splashing everywhere, and also I'll be at that point ready to stake them. Now the eye is in the center, so I might want to use some bamboo poles, I might want to use some different types of staking, but I do want to make sure that they are adequate to meet the height of the stalks, which are going to be about 4 feet tall. So I'm going to slowly over time just add soil to this, mounding it up, ever watchful, ever anxious, and ever excited about watching that first stalk erupt from the soil. Okay, now that we've got them planted, let's talk about where we're going to place them and how we're going to care for them. Now, dahlias really want full sun, a little bit of shade, but mostly they want full sun. But what they don't want is searing heat in the late afternoon. And of course, that is pretty much apropos for every brutally hot summer in the South, Oklahoma in particular. So that's another argument in favor of placing and planting them in containers, because those containers can then be moved in the hottest part of the day. So place them in full sun, but know that later you might want to relocate them if it gets too hot. Now look at this fun support. Ultimately, after I add soil, it's going to get, the level will be up to here, and at least for a while this will be a wonderful staking mechanism for them. I think it'll be really, really beautiful. I want to make sure that I keep them watered but not soggy, that I keep an eye on them. And when they get to be, about 12 inches tall and they've got 3 to 4 sets of really good leaves, then I'm going to pinch out the center. I'm going to pinch out that very tippy top of the center stalk so it will branch more. Now, I'm going to do that because I want more flowers. If I wanted a larger flower, like if I were going to do a state fair competition, then I would not pinch out the center. But I want lots of volume and lots of blooms, so I will be doing that. And pretty much, other than that, they are very easy care. So I'm just going to, like I say, watch and wait for the stalk to erupt from the tuber, and then it's just going to be glorious, and I'll wait for the show to begin. So there you go. I'll put at the end a screenshot this so you guys know what varieties that I ordered and a few planting tips for planting your own dahlias in containers.